Because there's so much information, I don't know whether I should be resting and pacing heavily or whether I should be like doing things I enjoy and trying to build up my activity or like fitness. And I think I keep flopping between doing them all and stressing about what's the right thing to be doing, and then I kind of get lost.
Welcome to this week's Therapeutic Tuesday. And for this week's episodes, we have another of our mini sessions. And this session is with Charlotte. And I think it's going to be a helpful tying together of some of the things that have been mentioned in some of the previous sessions that we've done. We're exploring some themes around bouncing the boundaries, around why routine is important, and some of the principles in establishing and structuring routine to support recovery from chronic fatigue. So here is Charlotte. So you were just giving me a bit of context and background in terms of kind of where you are and what you wanted to explore.
Yeah, so it's sort of because there's so much information, I don't know whether I should be resting and pacing heavily or whether I should be like doing things I enjoy and trying to build up my activity or like fitness. And I think I keep flopping between doing them all and stressing about what's the right thing to be doing, and then I kind of get lost of
so you have a whole set of ideas of things that you could be doing. Then you kind of do those and kind of go into overwhelm or think, perhaps I'm doing too many things. And then it's almost like there's a pattern that I think that can come in of exactly what you're saying, like a mental tennis. Like, do I stop doing everything? Do I do more of everything? Do I rest? Do I push through? And I think it's that thing of, It sounds like just knowing where you are. And I guess what would be helpful for me would perhaps get a bit more of a sense of just where you are in terms of like what you can do energy wise, what you can't do. Yeah, like how it feels to be in your body. We can try and figure out a bit more what stage you're at. That can also help us figure out then what's going to be most helpful.
Yeah, I think placing me in a stage, like I've listened to your video about stages before and I can't put myself in it, maybe stage 2. But I feel like I never was in stage 1. So I've had ME for 4 years after I had glandular fever at uni. And I never went into that stage where you sleep a lot. I think I've always not slept and I've had a problem with not being able to sleep.
Okay.
So I think I was push crashing a lot. So I've probably been in stage 2 forever, kind of tired and wired.
And is that because you've resisted letting your body fully rest, or you've just never felt that depth of tiredness that you've needed to go into a kind of stage 1 resting mode?
Probably a bit of both. Probably, I would have pushed myself to keep going because I'm like, this is silly. Like, why am I so tired? I want to be doing things. I'm a very like need to be doing achiever person. But then, also even when I am really, really tired and I go and lie down, I can't go to sleep. My mind is still going. Like my body can be physically exhausted and I can't move, but I'm still awake. I can't switch off.
Do you have times where you have a crash and you do just end up crashing out for a few days and then you are able to kind of deeply rest?
No, even my crashes are sort of like physically not being able to move or do anything, but I'm still awake. I never sleep then. So deep rest in the fact that I can't move, so I'm resting, but not. Yeah.
And what do your best days or best periods look like at the moment?
So I'd say like doing a food shop is like a big thing, like the biggest thing I can do physically, because that's usually like 20 minutes of walking around the shop. That's about my extent of physicalness. I can't work. I've tried in and out and it just makes me crash.
Sure.
I can walk about 5 or 10 minutes on a good day, basically.
Okay. And what does the rest of your day look like in terms of like structure and routine? Like how do you organize your day and the activity that you do?
At the moment, I'm trying to organize it around recovery. So I'm trying really hard to focus on that. So I kind of get up, do some yoga stretches and try and meditate for a bit. have breakfast. I'd say most of my day revolves around making and eating food because I'm trying to like make such healthy food. It consumes a lot of my time making and eating food.
Yeah.
And then in between, I actually read or watch a lot of how I can be recovering type stuff.
Yeah.
Not doing a lot with my day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are doing a lot with your day, but obviously not necessarily things you want to be doing with your day, which I get. Does it feel like however much you do to support your recovery, there's always more that you could be doing or should be doing? Like there's a kind of sense of, like, let's say you get up and you do your yoga stretches and you kind of make kind of healthy breakfast, then maybe you watch some recovery stories. Like, even if you're being quite diligent in terms of how you're using your day, there's still this sense of, but I could be doing this and I haven't done that. Is that the general kind of feeling?
Yeah, I think I do feel like that. Like, I think I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh, I haven't done a half an hour guided meditation today, or I haven't had a nap today, or I didn't go for a walk today, or
and I, without wanting to put words in your mouth, it sounds like it's almost one of those situations where if you have a day of doing a lot of resting, then it would be a kind of, well, you haven't done any of the more active things, like you haven't done your yoga, or you haven't done your kind of, whatever, you haven't done your cooking the way you should have been done. But then if you do more of the active stuff, then it's, well, you haven't had enough rest today and you've been to, so it's a bit like, excuse my language, but you're kind of fucked if you do and you're fucked if you don't, in a sense. But it's like, it sounds like whatever you do, it's not enough or it's not right.
And I don't feel like I've made any progress, so I think that's what frustrates me, that no matter what I do, I'm not going up, I'm just staying as I am.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the kind of circumstances before you first got sick, like what life was like and what the kind of build up to getting ill was like.
Typical university life, very full, like studied hard, went out, went on runs like several times a week, did fitness classes, things like that. I was a very like active, doing a lot kind of person. Got glandular fever, and then that knocked me, but I think I did try and carry on as I would then, carried on with uni work and went out occasionally and kept thinking, why am I not getting over this sort of thing? And it took a good 5 months before I was like, okay, I'm really not well. And the doctor then was like, I think you've got a bit more than glandular fever going on, or like post-viral fatigue, whatever they call it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you resonate with the idea of an achiever pattern, and when we talk about that, right, that it sounds like that you were kind of by nature pushing in the time leading up to getting ill, and then there was a kind of avoidance of denial when you were kind of first ill and kind of trying to push through. And then it makes sense that inevitably we try and solve the problem at the level the problem got created. And that's not to say that your achiever pattern is by any means the only variable in what's happening. Obviously, there's lots of ingredients to that. But it's kind of like the strategy to get into a calm, healing kind of state is being driven by the achiever pattern. Does that make sense? It's almost like there's a trying to achieve at getting your system calm. And kind of however much if you do too much, you're getting it wrong. If you don't do enough, you're getting it wrong. And then it sounds like you get in a bit of what I would call an analysis paralysis, where you're kind of thinking, well, maybe I should do more of this, but then I could be, and like whatever you do basically just feels like the wrong thing or not enough. And it's kind of your fault for not doing it right. There's a kind of judgment element, I think, that kind of is part of it as well. Is that?
Yeah, it's definitely like a worrying that like, if I'm resting, I'll get in my head like, oh, I'm deconditioning my body, or like I'm resting too much and then I'm not building up my activity levels. But then if I then go on a walk, I'll feel horrendous. I'm like, oh, I should have rested. I shouldn't have done so much. I'm always saying whatever I've done is wrong.
Yeah. And by the way, this pattern is not in any way exclusive to chronic fatigue, ME, post-viral fatigue, right? I mean, this is a a life strategy that lots of people use, in a sense that whatever we do isn't enough, or it's wrong, or we should have done this instead, or we should have done more of it, or we should have done less of it. But it's like a kind of constant value judgment on the way that we're kind of approaching things, which inevitably results in us kind of feeling like it's our fault and we're failing, we're not getting it right, which then just escalates the sense of overwhelm, right? Like it just creates more of a sense of, well, if I could just get it right, then things would be kind of sorting out. And then it's almost like we end up watching or listening to recovery stories by other people, and then it becomes a weapon to beat ourselves up with, of, well, well, they figured it out and they were doing kind of more of it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
How familiar are you with the idea of the inner critic?
Very. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of inner critic meditations and things like that.
Yeah.
Inner critic work.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're describing is a very typical kind of inner critic pattern, really, and everything that we do gets filtered through that. And it's not just the commentary, and the kind of decision making, like, should I do more of this? Should I do more of that? I didn't do that right. I could have got that better. It's also the sense of kind of weight and kind of pressure that comes from that it's almost like there's a judgment and a kind of self-worth judgment that comes from that. I don't know if that is something that resonates.
I don't see it as a self-worth thing, but then maybe I'm not aware of that. But it's more of a frustration of, come on, I want to get on with my life, so we need to be doing this so I can get better and move on. That's what my drive is behind that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's almost like you're not going to recover until you get this right, sort of thing. Like recovery is a result of satisfying this kind of needing to figure out. And what you were saying a bit earlier makes sense as well, that if you feel you're not making progress, like it feels like it's not progressing, then it's almost like more pressure piling on to well, we need to get this right and get this figured out. Yeah. So a few things that I think might be helpful. It sounds like you're already doing some work with the inner critic. We'll talk a bit more about that. But I think one of the other ways to kind of get some space from the kind of the overwhelm and the judgment and the attack is to decide a plan that's a kind of reasonable, sensible, kind of measured kind of plan. And then you kind of commit to that for a few weeks or a month, whatever that may be. And then it's almost like whenever the inner critic's coming in, you're like, well, this is the plan. Fuck off, basically. It's like you consciously choose and take your position of what it is that you're going to be doing. And then anything that's a comment and a judgment on that is exposed as that. And you kind of treat it as that and defend against it. As opposed to what I think that's happening at the moment is that you're then kind of getting sucked into a lot of internal dialogue and debate and discussion, and maybe it's right, and actually perhaps I should be doing this. So it's almost like you take a more substantial position, and this is my plan of what I'm going to do, and I'm just not going to have it analyzed and attacked and judged. But then you go, okay, I'm going to do it for maybe a week initially or a month or whatever. And then you take some time to sit and review, but you do that in a kind of considered, planned way, rather than a kind of moment-to-moment assessment, judgment, kind of pressure around it. Right. It's a little bit like, somebody who, I don't know about you. I remember when I was at uni, and partly because I had chronic fatigue at the time, but I remember my second year, I basically didn't do any work the whole year. And then I was like 2 months out from exams, and I was looking at past papers. I was like, I don't even understand the question. It's not I don't know the answer. I literally do not even understand the words that are in the question. So it was like, I've got 10 weeks, whatever it was, and I have to basically learn the syllabus in 10 weeks. It was like completely kind of overwhelming, but then kind of chunking it down and breaking it down into a very kind of bite-sized, clear, step-by-step kind of chunk kind of moves from a sense of like total paralysis of overwhelm, oh my God, I'm going to fail, I'm going to drop out, it's kind of awful, to I just have to do this thing in front of me kind of each day. and each day progressing and moving forwards and feeling the sense of kind of progress with that. And I think that kind of strategy is often helpful in the recovery path when there's so many things that we could be doing, or we think we should be doing, that we just kind of go into a sense of overwhelm and there's no sense of achievement. Like you could have a day doing all the right things, but you could think of all the things that you didn't do that you could have done. So there's also not this sense of achievement along the way. And so that ends up being more of a kind of source of attack and judgment. So I think what would be helpful for us to do is to break this down a bit more and go, let's try and agree a plan of the things that you're going to prioritize and focus on, and then commit to that for a period of time. And then you can send me an email update and go, this is kind of where I'm at and how I kind of got to with that. Does that sound like a kind of useful way of using the time we've got?
Yeah, that definitely sounds good, because I think I've done sort of plans in the past that I think I've been trying to put too much into a plan maybe. Right. And then I'll either, they won't last long, because I'll either get bored with it and want to be like, oh, it's such a sunny day, I want to go on a walk, and I don't, not stick to my plan because I want to do X, Y, and Z. Or I'll have too much to be doing and I don't end up doing it, and then I get stressed that I haven't done all the things on my list that day. Or, yeah.
Generally, the thing that I observe is people significantly overestimate what can be done in the short term, and they often underestimate what can be achieved in the medium to long term. So when people set the priorities and kind of goals like this, they try and do too many things too quickly, get into overwhelm, and then either struggle along but feel like they're failing the whole time, or just kind of give up because it becomes too overwhelming. But actually, the right things at a sensible commitment over a gradual period of time actually starts to have impact and change. And then, of course, we start to feel a sense of achievement and success, which then allows us to build upon that to progress and move forwards. So what of the various tools that you've got at the moment, what feels the most like it is helpful? Like it sounds like there's a lot of stuff that you've come across that you could use. But like, what feel like the few things which genuinely feel like these are the things that should be part of my
plan? Some sort of like rest period, guided meditation type thing, I know is helpful, but I know I procrastinate it a lot. That's the one thing that I'm like, oh, I'll do that in a minute, do it in a minute, and it gets to the end of the day and I haven't done it. But I feel like I need to. But I think I get to a point where I'm so tired I need to lie down, and then that's when I'll do it. And I think, should I be scheduling like a set time each day to make myself do that whether I'm tired or not?
Yeah, if you're resting at the point that you are so tired you can't do anything else, then you've already drained your system and you've gone to your energy reserves. And when you go to your energy reserves, that normally looks like adrenaline and cortisol and wired kind of energy. So we don't want you reaching that point. And it might take a while to reset the balance here, because your system's probably got used to running in that way. But we want to get to the point that there's enough resting before that point that your nervous system starts to switch off, because it doesn't need to be on. It's almost like when normal energy runs out, we switch to our reserve energy, and that's nervous system energy. If we don't run out of normal energy, that system stops switching on. The whole system then suddenly switches off and starts to calm down. So the answer to your question is that yes, we want you resting before you get to that point. And that might look like initially lying down to rest and feeling like you can't really rest because you're not drained and tired enough. But I think your system's learned that it only switches off at exhaustion. And we want it switching off long before that. And that might take some retraining and some practice to encourage that. So it might be one rest a day. It might be 2 or 3 shorter rests a day. And I think that's probably something you need to experiment with. But for most people, what sensible times of day to rest are after lunch is often a good time, because there tends to be a hormone crash or dip that most people experience that time of day anyway. So taking the edge off that is a helpful way of supporting the system. Also, if we've had lunch, we've got a full tummy, so our blood sugar tends to be balanced, so we're more able to kind of switch off and relax. And for some people, mid-morning and kind of late afternoon can be additional kind of rest points. When you rest at the moment, how long do you normally rest for?
Depends what level of exhausted I am.
Right.
If I'm going to, like, I ought to take a rest now, it'd be about half an hour. But if I'm like crashed out, it'd be an hour or two.
Yeah. So I think we should say let's have a 30 to 45 minute rest every day. And if you ever need more than that, you take as much as you need. So it's not up to 30, 45 minutes. It's a minimum of 30 to 45 minutes. And if that ends up being 3 hours one day, that's totally fine. For the stage that you're at, you should let your body have as much rest as you possibly can. You have to remember, you're suffering from a severe chronic illness of which the primary symptom is fatigue. What's the primary resolution to fatigue? It's deep rest. So any time you can get deep rest, you should get deep rest. The only caveat to this is if you're resting so much in the day that it's significantly distorting your sleep pattern at night, then that can be a consideration. How is your nighttime sleep?
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I kind of get scared of taking a rest, because I'm like, oh, this means I'm not going to be able to sleep because my sleep's pretty bad at night.
And is there an absolute correlation between those two things or not? Because sometimes there isn't.
No.
So an observation that I would make, and I observe this more in my kids than I necessarily do in patients, although I think it is also true for patients, is that being overtired actually makes sleep patterns worse. So one thing that's interesting when you have young kids is that the transition from napping at like 2-3 points in the day to not doing that to try and they don't need it anymore is sometimes people take away daytime naps. The kids then don't sleep at night and think, oh, that means that that they're still having too much rest. So they keep cutting the rest, and actually they sleep less and less because they get more and more adrenalized and more wired. So I've also observed there are people where more rest in the day actually results in better and more sleep at night, which may sound counterintuitive, but that's the reason why. So let's say there's and I think it's a loose plan initially, because you'll also, I think, need to feel into it and see what kind of works. But so one thing is 30 to 45 minutes as a minimum each day of rest. And that might be after lunch, or if there's another point in the day that works better, that's fine. And that might be sleep, or that might be listening to some kind of guided relaxation. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I find it very difficult to actually nap, like to actually sleep during a nap. I'm usually listening to guided meditation.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. What else? What else feels like you think it's something that feels important, that it is not that you've read somewhere that helps someone else, but in your felt experience feels helpful for you?
Well, when I'm like outside in the sun or at the beach or something like that, I know it does my like mental health good. Like I feel better for it, but then I think I enjoy it too much and I walk too far, and then it ends up doing me bad. So I feel like some sort of outside is good, but I don't know where to.
Do you have a baseline walking level that feels solid for you at the moment?
No, I think it varies so much.
And what's the variation? Like what's the low level and the high level of that?
2 to 5 minutes minimum, up to 20 to 30 minutes max.
Okay.
But that's very unstable. So
sure. Yeah. So I think another objective should be to try and get a consistent baseline of 5 to 6 days a week that you can do. And it sounds like you don't quite know where that is. It's probably.
So is this what I can do every day?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. I never know whether to do, like walk every few days, every other day,
So the general principle, we're looking for like 5 days a week. Like I think having rest days, even someone that's, training for the Olympics should have rest days. Like it's the body needs kind of variation in what we're doing. But most people think their level is higher than it is. There's a kind of self-deceiving that tends to go on. And sometimes it's a little bit humbling initially to go, actually, my real level of what I can do is this. Anything beyond that's kind of pushing that leads to a crash. But once you, even if the level, it maybe the level's 2 minutes, maybe it's, you can do 2 minutes reliably. If you're crashing afterwards, or your nervous system's going into a kind of more wired state, that probably, not definitely, but probably means that you're doing more than you should. The thing is, though, once you've got a stable baseline and your nervous system switches off and calms down more, and you get deeper quality of sleep, your energy should start to increase. So then the baseline goes up. So as much as it can be a little bit dissatisfying to start with, if it works, and then you're going from 2 minutes to 3 minutes to 5 minutes to 7 minutes to 10 minutes, and you can see the progress, then it becomes much easier to stick to that. And I think part of the challenge, it sounds like that you're having, is that you're putting a lot of energy in and not getting much output. And that's frustrating and creating a kind of overwhelmed state. Yeah. And then the more we kind of talk about it, the more clear it becomes to me of possibly why that might be, which is that it doesn't sound like there's a steady baseline at the moment. And it sounds like you're always trying to be slightly further on than you actually are, which is a little bit like, if you've got someone that's got normal energy, let's say they're producing 100 units of energy a day, and to be in balance, they should be spending 75 to 80 a day. So there's always a little bit left over for kind of reserves, a little bit like money. If someone's earning £100 a week, then all said and done, they should probably be spending 75 to 80 pounds a week. So they're putting away some kind of savings. So the day that the boiler packs up or the car breaks down, there's no stress because there's resources to support it. It sounds like before getting ill, obviously glandular fever was a kind of tipping point, that if you had 100, you were probably trying to always spend 105, 110. It sounds like now, maybe the levels, just for argument's sake, it's at 50%. It sounds like you are like, well, Alex, I've cut my activity massively, but I think your production's at 50 and you're trying to spend 55. Does that I don't know if that resonates?
Yeah, that does make sense. And yeah, like you said, I would argue that I'd always be like, well, like, I'm not working, I'm not doing this anymore, because I did so much more at the beginning of the illness. I've cut back and cut back and cut back. I'm like, I'm literally doing nothing all day, right. But I'm probably still doing more. But
you're always trying to do a bit more of the nothing than your body's at. And we're not talking like the drop you've made from where life was to where you are now was a far more painful drop than we're talking about now. What we're talking about now is kind of subtle, and it's not nearly as difficult, and it's not nearly as life disrupting and challenging. But it's, in a strange way, it's the shift that makes all the difference. Because if your production's at 50 and you've gone from 100 down to 55, your system is still in a state of stress. If you go from 55 to 49, it's like it's a much smaller drop, but actually it's suddenly the whole difference, that you're not needing to use your nervous system energy to constantly compensate and keep things going. That can switch off and it can heal. Then as that heals, your body sleeps more deeply, you rest more easily, your normal energy production starts to work more efficiently, you start to have more energy, and then suddenly 50 goes to 60, but you're still at 48, 49, 60 goes to 65, and then you start to bring your activity up, but you bring your activity up below the actual energy that you're producing, so you maintain that balance. So we're going to find out what your kind of baseline is in terms of walking, and that's a bit of an experiment, I think. But I would start on the cautious side. In terms of the rest of the day, how do you structure that in terms of activity? So it sounds like you're doing various stuff of kind of reading and kind of watching stuff, and how do you know what to do when in the rest of your day?
I think it's not that structured. Like the afternoon is kind of like try and do some sort of exercise at some point, either yoga or a walk or something, try and have a rest at some point, and then I'll either like see a friend one day, or I don't know, afternoons are kind of random. They're not very structured.
And how about mornings?
Mornings more structured because it's kind of like yoga, meditation, breakfast. Like, yeah.
Okay. And evenings, or is evenings just kind of sofa kind of rest kind of time?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think getting a really clear structure for the whole day, and I know this is going to feel boring. I understand that it's taking away the kind of spontaneity and the variety. And it kind of goes back to where we were saying near the beginning around figuring out what stage you're at. So I think you're at stage 2, and I think you're trapped at stage 2 because you're trying to push your way out of stage 2. And it's basically impossible to push your way out of stage 2. So the more you try and push out of stage 2, actually all that's happening is you're just causing more wiredness in your system. So do you need to dip to stage 1? I don't know. But what I think is true is you need to move in the direction of stage 1 a little bit, which is realizing, again, what I was saying, chronic illness, fatigue is the primary symptom, rest is the resolution of fatigue. How do we create? And it's not, you can't push your way to recovery, and you can't just rest your way to recovery. You have to get your nervous system into a calm, healing state, and then the healing process is able to happen. So at this stage, routine and structure is your best friend. The breakthrough at one stage is the limitation at the next stage. We could absolutely be having a conversation where I'm like, you have too much structure and too much routine, and that has become the problem. But right now, I think what you need is more structure and routine. And as much as that may feel a bit like being trapped and a bit dull and a bit boring, when your nervous system knows what's happening when and how much is being demanded, and you start to get within your baseline of what you're able to do, everything will start to calm and settle as a result of that. Then you start to get more energy, and as I say, the whole thing then becomes much easier from that point. But we need to get that routine to allow things to settle and switch off.
I think I haven't been allowing myself to fully rest as much as I need to, because I have in my head of like, oh, I need to be doing things that cultivate joy or like purpose or passion, which I don't feel I have in my life at all. So yeah.
And I think that those things are really important, but it's hard to do those things when you're up and down. You know, it's like you can do something that's deeply pleasurable and be in a state of wiredness and not particularly enjoy that thing that's pleasurable. Like you can, you know, I don't know, be with a friend that you love hanging out with, having a really satisfying kind of, you know, great conversation, but actually just feel like shit. And so it's as much as taking routine and structure and holding it all lightly is definitely helpful, and that absolutely has its place. And we've already put out a couple of these, one of these sessions where that was kind of part of what we were talking about. You also, my sense is that you'll have much less overwhelm with your inner critic and with the kind of sense of all the things you should be doing. And this is kind of, I suppose, the next piece I wanted to comment on, that once you've got the structure and routine, you then tell your inner critic to bog off and stop assessing and judging it the whole time. It's like, I've decided that I'm doing my, you know, whatever it is in terms of rest point, in terms of walking, in terms of morning and afternoon, you might say, I'm going to have an hour in the morning, and whether it's half an hour or 2 hours and 3 hours, I don't, you need to figure out where that is for you. But I'm going to have a window time in the morning that's my recovery learning time. And whatever that is, watching YouTube videos, doing online courses, whatever that might be. And then in the afternoon, maybe you have a window of time, which is your kind of, you know, social time or fun time to kind of go off and whatever it may be. But again, you build that within a structure and a routine, so your nervous system knows where you are, and you don't get to the point of exhaustion. You start to get within a kind of comfort zone. And then we're looking for energy to start to build from there. And you expand not through pushing, but by the fact that you've actually got the energy there behind it.
Yeah. So how do you recognize when you're in nervous energy or real energy? I think that's something I struggle with.
Yeah, it's a great question. It has a convoluted and not always very clear answer, which is that you feel the difference. So when you're in nervous energy, it feels a bit frenetic. It feels a bit like it's not calm. Like there's a kind of overactivation to it. There's a sense of urgency that kind of things need to happen quickly. And there's a sense of looking for problems and things that are going to go wrong, and kind of anxiety about things. When it's real, and it's also more in your head, like your sense will be kind of a bit kind of up here. When it's real energy, there's more substance to it. Like there's more of a sense of comfort and confidence, and you kind of just, there's a trust that often goes with it, and it's more grounded, like it's less frenetic. And it isn't always as clear, the difference. And that's part of how you have to learn the language of your own body. And you learn that by experimenting and going, I'm not sure if this is real energy or nervous energy. And then you go off and do something and you crash and you go, well, it must have been nervous energy. And then you kind of remember, well, that's how that felt that time. And then the next time you go, oh, it feels the same. So I think that's what it is.
Right. I think, I'm quite good at recognizing it after. Once I've crashed, I'm like, okay, I was definitely running on adrenaline. Because sometimes there's times when I'm surprised I have energy, because say I did too much the next day or something, and I'm like, I'm surprisingly like, yeah, let's go do things. And then later on crash, I'm like, oh, okay, that was adrenaline. That wasn't actually me.
But by the very nature of the fact that you're able to do some of the things which would be quite a way above your baseline suggests to me that there is energy that's coming back into your system. Like, I think if you get a more steady baseline and you start to live comfortably in that baseline, I think your baseline is going to rise. Like, there are certain people, I'm talking to them, I'm like, we're going to get the baseline, and my kind of guess is it's going to be a long time, or at least, months before we see much improvement, because there's a whole deficit of exhaustion that needs paying off, and that's going to take a while. I'm not always right, but my sense is here that if you get the baseline, I think you'll see the baseline come up at a noticeable pace. But I think you need to get the baseline established first.
Okay.
So in terms of, I'm going to give you some homework, and I'm going to suggest that you send me a few emails at a couple of points, and then we can kind of see where you get to with it. So I think you should do a kind of day plan, and you might want to do a day plan and do a week plan. So what I mean by that is, you might say, well, at 5 days a week, this is the plan. And you might say, I'm going to have weekends off. And weekends off might mean that you still have your kind of rest periods, but you're not working on recovery 7 days a week, because that also becomes unsustainable. Like, people that work jobs 7 days a week end up with burnout. People that work recovery 7 days a week end up burning out in the recovery process, in a sense. So you can have a kind of on day and off day kind of plan. And then you're going to have to experiment with that a little bit to find out where that kind of baseline is. And then once you've got that, commit to that for, let's say, a couple of weeks. And what I don't mean when I say commit to that is, if you think the baseline is 5 minutes, let's say, walk a day, and you have a day that you feel shit and you go, right, well, I'm still doing my 5 minutes walk. That's not what I mean. Your body always trumps the plan. So if you've got more energy than the plan, for a while you hold off on that. But if you've got less energy, you listen to it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is another thing that I always wonder, whether I should still do those things regardless of how I feel.
No, you should listen.
Don't walk if I feel worse.
Chronic fatigue, primary symptom of fatigue. Fatigue is resolved by rest. When your body needs rest and you ignore it, you slow down the process for the stage that you're at.
Yeah.
So send me the plan in the next few days when you've kind of worked out what that is, and I might give you a few comments via email. And then once you've got the plan, let's do the plan for a couple of weeks, and then send me an update in a couple of weeks. And then it takes a bit of time to figure out kind of where it is. I know it can sometimes feel like it's a step back, because it's like, I've got to slow stuff down. I've got to be more structured. If you feel that way, I understand. But it's a kind of strategic retreat to be able to advance in a more effective way. Once you've got the plan, you then need to be disciplined and diligent in defending yourself against your inner critic's constant comments about it. So you get to feel success when you follow your plan. And if you have to rest and do less, that's fine. But it's not a case of then how much more can you add in and complicate it. It should be the way to hold the relationship with your kind of active recovery is how someone holds a healthy relationship with a job. You focus on it when you're doing it, and then you leave it at work when you come home. You work some days a week and you have other days off. It's like, it's not a 24/7 thing. It's having a structure that works, that you commit to, that then you leave yourself alone outside of it.
Yeah.
Does that feel doable?
Yeah. With the daily plan, do you mean literally hour by hour, like at 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can hold it lightly. I'm not saying that you then have to kind of panic. Oh my God, it's 1:10 and I've not started the 1 o'clock activity. But it's like just having a sense of orientation of what that looks like. Because again, your nervous system, for the stage you're at, your nervous system will settle once it feels where it exists within a rhythm which is at the right level.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Good. Any questions you've got for now?
I don't think so.
Okay. Good. All right. So send me an email in the next kind of few days when you've got that kind of mapped down, and then we'll take it from there.
Hey, thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. Appreciate you making the time to chat like this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that mini session. If you've missed any of the previous Therapeutic Tuesdays, you can find them at alexhoward.tv and also on my YouTube, Facebook channels and various other social media places. There's now, it must be the 7th, I think, episode that we've now done. So there's a good kind of collection there to explore. Tomorrow is Wellness Wednesday. And for this week's Wellness Wednesday, we have an excerpt from my interview with Dr. Michael Ruscio as part of the Fatigue Super Conference, where we're talking about gut health and how important that can be to optimizing energy and wellness.